But as he looked around for orange soil, he saw none, just a lot of gray lunar rock, much of it in shatter cones caused by the force of the impact. Mission Control was disappointed. Nevertheless, Schmidt and Cernan began collecting samples and putting them in numbered specimen bags. "These are very intensely fractured rocks," Schmidt said, handling a specimen, "and it comes off in small flakes." Schmidt cast his eye about and saw another sample that he wanted, a curious-looking rock about 10 inches long, shaped like a tablet. "We ought to take that just as is," he told Cernan, even though it was almost too big for a single sample bag. They picked it up with the tongs. "Let me hold this end," said Cernan as they tried to maneuver the specimen into the bag. "Let me hold it, and you put the bag on." Then he paused, looking closely. "Well, see that? See the white fragments in there?" He pointed to a number of white fragments embedded within the rock. "Yeah," said Schmidt, examining the spots closely. "You know, it might be that these might be pieces of the projectile. I don't know, 'cause it doesn't look like... It's not subfloor. Okay, pin it down." When the rock was safely bagged, Schmidt asked, "What's the number?" "It's 480, responded Cernan, reading out the number printed on the side. Meanwhile, Houston had become impatient with the time being wasted at Van Surg, now that they had determined there wasn't any orange soil there. They asked Cernan to quit the crater and take some 500-millimeter photographs of North Massif, while Schmidt did a radial survey of the ejecta blanket surrounding Van Surg. Schmidt worked slowly, and during the survey his scoop broke. Dust problems again. Houston told him to forget the rest of the radial survey and prepare to close out the site. The next day, Cernan and Schmidt lifted out of the Taurus Littrow Valley, becoming the last human beings, at least for now, to walk on the moon. Apollo 17 returned to Earth with a splashdown on December 19, 1972. Lunar Sample 480 joined 842 pounds of other lunar rocks from the Apollo missions at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. 8 months later, with the end of the Apollo program, the Lunar Receiving Laboratory was closed and its contents were transferred to a newly built, super high-tech facility at the Johnson Space Center called the Sample Storage and Processing Laboratory, or SSPL for short. Sometime during that 8-month period before the transfer of the moon rocks to the new SSPL, the rock known as Lunar Sample 480 vanished. Around the same time, all entries related to its discovery disappeared from the computer catalog and hard copy card files. Today, if you go to the SSPL and make a query to the Lunar Sample Registry database under the entry LS480, you will receive the following error message. Query: LS480. Illegal number, no such number. Please check lunar sample number and try again. Part 1. The Maze. Stem Weathers scrambled to the top of the Mesa de los Viejos, tied his burro to a dead juniper, and settled himself down on a dusty boulder. A steady wind blowing across the mesa top plucked at his beard, cooling him after the hot, dead air of the canyons. Studying the familiar landmarks, he silently recited the names: Daggett Canyon, Sundown Rocks, Navajo Rim, Orphan Mesa, Mesa del Yeso, Deadeye Canyon, Blue Earth, La Cuchilla, the Echo Badlands, the White Place, the Red Place, and Tyrannosaur Canyon. Weathers slipped a packet of Bull Durham out of a greasy vest pocket and rolled a smoke with gnarled, dirt-blackened hands, his fingernails cracked and yellow. Striking a wooden match on his pant leg, he fired up the Quirly and took in a long drag. For the past 2 weeks he had restricted his tobacco ration, but now he could splurge. Weathers squinted up at the sun, 2 hours off the horizon. If he didn't get moving, he wouldn't reach the Chama River before dark. Salt, his burro, Hadn't had a drink since morning, and Weathers didn't want a dead animal on his hands. Weathers stubbed out his cigarette and slipped the dead bud into his pocket. He scouted the rim until he found the faint, sloping trail leading to the bottom. A treacherous descent, it had landslided out in various places, forcing the traveler to navigate 1,000-foot drop-offs. He picked his way down, careful with himself and the burro, relieved when they approached the dry wash along the bottom. Joaquin Wash would take him past the entrance to the maze and from there to the Chama River. At Chama Bend, there was a natural campsite where the river made a tight turn with a sandbar where one could swim. By tomorrow afternoon, he would be in Abiquiu. First thing, he'd phone Harry Dearborn. The battery on his sat phone had died some days back, just to let him know. Weathers tingled at the thought of breaking the news. The trail finally reached the bottom. Weathers glanced up. The canyon face was dark, but the late afternoon sun blazed on the rim rock. He froze. 1,000 feet above, a man, silhouetted on the rim, stared down at him. He swore under his breath. It was the same man who had followed him from Santa Fe into the Chama wilderness 2 weeks ago. People like that knew of Weathers' unique skill. People who were too lazy or stupid to do their own prospecting and hoped to jump his claim. Still wearing the biker head scarf, he followed him on foot up Joaquin Wash from the Chama River. Weathers had lost his pursuer in the maze and reached the top of the Mesa of the Ancients before the biker found his way out. Stem Weathers studied first the lazy curves of Joaquin Wash, then the rock spires marking the mouth of the maze. He would lose him in the maze again. Weathers' ebullient mood returned. The maze lay just ahead, and he'd enter there. Deep in the maze, near 2 rocks, was a rare source of water. A rock ledge covered with maidenhair ferns, which dripped water into an ancient basin carved in the sandstone by prehistoric Indians. Weathers decided to camp there instead of at Chama Bend, where he'd be an open target. He rounded the great rock pillar marking the entrance. 1,000-foot canyon walls of Aeolian sandstone soared above him. The majestic Entrada Formation, the compacted remains of a Jurassic desert. Not even a map would help you in the maze, and the great depth of the canyons made GPS and satellite phones useless. The first round struck Weathers in the shoulder from behind, and it felt more like a hard punch than a bullet. He landed on his hands and knees, his mind blank with astonishment. It was only when the report cracked and echoed through the canyons that he realized he'd been shot. There was no pain yet, just a buzzing numbness. But he saw that shattered bone protruded from a torn shirt, and pumping blood was splattering on the sand. He staggered back to his feet as the second shot kicked up the sand next to him. The third shot kicked up sand in front of him. Weathers ran, seeing that he still had a chance. The attacker had ambushed him from the rim above, and it would take the man several hours to descend. If Weathers could reach that stone pillar, he might escape. He might actually live. He zigzagged, his lungs screaming with pain. 50 yards, 40, 30. He heard the shot only after he felt the bullet slam into his lower back and saw his own entrails empty onto the sand in front of him, the inertia pitching him face down. He tried to rise, sobbing and clawing, furious that someone would steal his find. He writhed, howling, clutching his pocket notebook, hoping to throw it, lose it, destroy it, to keep it from his killer. But there was no place to conceal it, and then, as if in a dream, he could not think, could not move. Tom Broadbent reined in his horse. 4 shots had rolled down Joaquin Wash from the great walled canyons east of the river. He wondered what it meant. It wasn't hunting season, and nobody in his right mind would be out in those canyons target shooting. He checked his watch. 8 o'clock. The sun had just sunk below the horizon. The echoes seemed to have come from the cluster of hoodoo rocks at the mouth of the maze. It would be a 15-minute ride, no more. He had time to make a quick detour. The full moon would rise before long, and his wife, Sally, Wasn't expecting him before midnight anyway.